Good morning, everyone. In the last session, we discussed about how to develop REST API with GET request, what is path parameter, what is query parameter, then how to deal with JSON data and XML data, JSON data and XML data, when to use path, when to use query params, what is produces, how to return JSON data and XML data from the REST API. How to return JSON data and XML data from the REST API we discussed. Okay, next. I want to return multiple Java objects. So yesterday we returned just one Java object. So only we are getting one object response. How can I return multiple Java objects? Right, list of products I want to return. Fine guys, so from now onwards, I'm not going with XML, I'm going with directly JSON. Is it okay? Is it okay guys if I go with JSON directly? Come on. Yes, I'm going with JSON directly. We already understood what is XML, how we will deal with XML, what is JAXP. Now, so here at the rate data I have, I want here parameterized constructor. So I'm taking first no-aux constructor. So if I want to add a parameterized constructor, I need to add the no-aux constructor also. Zero param constructor I should add. For that no-aux constructor, then I am going for all-aux constructor. I'm going for all-aux constructor. Fine. Next. So here, product object I can create in order to get the data. Public response entity, public response entity of list of products. I want to return multiple products. So for that I am writing get products. Public list of products, get products. My method is going to return list of collection of product objects. So let us create collection of objects. Let us create a collection of objects. So let me create product P1 is equal to new product, product ID, product name, product ID, product name, and product price. I'm setting product price. Okay. Next, product P2 is equal to new product of RAM. Right. Product P3 is equal to new product of 103 of CPU. Like this. I'm having more than one product. List of products. Okay, let's prepare a collection because my method is returning a response entity of list of products. How can we return this? So I'm going to take arrays dot as list p1 comma p2 comma p3. Arrays dot as list of p1 p2 p3. So I'm getting products list. I'm getting products list. Using parameterized constructor, I am creating three objects with the data. Using those three objects, I'm preparing one collection. Then how to return this? Return new response entity. Return new response entity, body and status code. So what is the body? What data you want to send in the body? I want to send products data in the body. I want to send products data in the body. Then http status dot okay. http status dot okay. I'm sending all the product objects. I'm sending all the product objects. Okay, now here I'm going to specify get mapping slash products. Do we need to specify producers is equal to JSON? Guys, do we need to specify producers is equal to JSON? Not required. What is the default format? What is the default format they are going to support? The default format is JSON. We no need to specify that producers. Okay, right. Let's run our application. Let's run our application. Run as boot application. Application started. Let's go to Postman. Let's go to Postman. Open the Postman. Using this Postman, I'm going to test our REST API. Using this Postman, I'm going to test my REST API. If I do /product, if I do /product, I don't give any header now. If I give /product, internal server error, content type is null, no converter for the product class. Application /XML, remove this. I'm giving only JSON format. Producers. Okay, click on send. Am I able to get the data in the JSON format now? Am I able to get the data in the JSON format? /product, I'm getting one object. When I go for products, am I able to get products, all the products in the JSON array? Am I able to get all the products in the JSON array? Clear, guys? So how to deal with more than one object? How to deal with more than one object? Using list of products. So my method is returning list of products. Even if you access this in the browser, it is a GET request. You can access the GET request in the browsers also. When you access in the browser also, it is giving JSON data. When you access a GET request in the browser, it is giving JSON array. So this is first product object. This is a second product object, and this is third product object. So three objects I am returning from my method. Those three objects are displaying. Three objects I am returning from my method. So those three objects are converted to JSON, and JSON data is coming. Are we doing this Java object to JSON conversion, or Jackson API converting internally? Are we writing the code? Are we writing the code to convert these objects into JSON? Message converter is converting this. Message converter is converting this. So here I'm not specifying producers. When I don't specify the producers, what is the default format it is going to take? What is the default format it is going to take? By default, it is going to take JSON format. Are you clear? Are you guys clear? Yes. So if you want to work with more than one object, if you want to work with more than one object, then you can specify like this: list of products, get products. So it is giving all the products in the JSON format. Those JSON format, JSON data, you can display as a table in your UI. So in future, when we develop our front-end application, backend application will give the data in the JSON format. Front-end application will display that JSON data in the table format. Now you see, if you go to our website, you are getting, when you click on this training schedules, the data is coming in the table format. List of records are coming. Those records are displaying in the table format. List of records are coming. Those records are displaying in the table format. So from the backend, the data will come in the JSON. That JSON data we are going to display as a table at the front end. JSON data we are going to display as a table at the front end. Clear guys, how to work with a single object and how to work with multiple objects, how to work with a single object and how to work with multiple objects. Got it? Here for this binding class, I'm writing two annotations which are used to display, which are used to add, constructors. No args constructor means zero param constructor will be added. All args constructor means parameterized constructor will be added. Parameterized constructor will be added. Clear? Good. So with this we understood get request, how to deal with get request, how to deal with get request, what is produces, what is accept header, and how to deal with JSON data, how to return single object from REST API method, how to return collection of objects from the REST API method, what is REST controller, what is the get mapping, what is path parameter, what is query parameter. Now, so let's try to understand how to work with HTTP post request. Working with HTTP post request. Guys, can you tell me when we should go for HTTP post request in the REST API? When we should go for HTTP post request in the REST API? Someone is asking a question. When we already have @ data, then why are you writing these constructors? If you write @ data, by default, zero param constructor will come, sir. Mister, observe. When I write @ data, by default setters getters will come. Zero parameter constructor also will come. But I want parameterized constructor. When I add a parameterized constructor, all args constructor I am writing. When I write all args constructor, default constructor will not come. That is the reason I'm adding both constructors. Okay, good. Next, when to go for HTTP post request. HTTP post request is used to create or insert a resource at the server side. HTTP post request is used to create new resource or record at server. Post request is used to create a new resource or record at the server. Post request contains request body. Client can send data to server in request body. Client can send data to server in the request body. Okay, to bind the method to post method, to bind REST controller method, to post request, we will use @post mapping. To bind REST controller method to post request, we will use post mapping. To bind REST controller method to post request, we will use post mapping. Clear with my point? To bind REST controller method to post request, we will use post mapping. To read the data from the request body, to read, how we are reading the data from the query parameters and path parameters, guys? How we are reading the data from query parameters and path parameters? Can you tell me? How we are reading the data from the query parameters and path parameters from the URL? Which annotations we have to read the data from the query parameters and path parameters? Which annotations we have to read the data from query parameters and path parameters? Come on, guys, fast. Which annotations are available to read the data from query parameters and path parameters? We have request param and path variable. So similarly, to read data from request body. Client will send the payload in the request body. Client will send payload in the request body. To read data from request body, we will use request body annotation. To read data from request body, we will use request body annotation. Okay. Now consumes represents which formats in which formats method can take input. Okay. Content type header represents in which format client is sending data in request body. Produces accept is different. Produces will represent in which format method can provide the response. Consumes represents in which formats method can take the input. So client is going to send passenger data for IRCTC. Make My Trip is sending passenger data to IRCTC. IRCTC will accept passenger data in how many formats? Is it supporting both XML and JSON, or it is supporting only JSON? Is it supporting both XML and JSON? Is it supporting only JSON? That it will be represented by using consumes. Consumes represents in which formats method can take the input. Content type header represents in which format client is sending data in request body. So for example, if you go here, we are developing one REST API. So here, these REST APIs, this REST API is having clients. One REST API can have multiple clients, client 1, client 2. So this REST API is simply add book. Simply, this is a book /book post request /book. Right. Now consumes represents XML and JSON. Consumes XML and JSON means this method can take the input in the XML format as well as in the JSON format. Method will take the data in the XML format as well as in the JSON format. So this client 1 is talking to the REST API. Client 2 also talking to the REST API. C1 and C2. In which formats this method will take the request data? Client 1 send a data in the request body. Client 2 also will send the data in the request body. How this REST API will understand in which format clients are sending the data? They will set one header content type. They will set one header called content type. Content type is equal to JSON. That means client is sending the request body data in the JSON format. So here, this client will set the content type is equal to XML. Content type will represent in which format client is sending data in the request body. Client is sending data in which format? What is the data available in the request body? Now you see, we discussed about HTTP request structure. So do you remember that HTTP request structure? I explained HTTP request structure for you. Yeah, can you see this request structure? Payload is available. Payload means business data that we will keep in the request body and we will send to the server. Client will prepare a request and client will send the request to the server. That request contains payload. Business data will be available. A request contains a payload. Business data will be available. Some clients may send body data in the text format. Some clients may send body data in the XML format. Some clients may send body data in the JSON format. How REST API will understand in which format you are sending the data? You will keep the data in the body, that is your payload. what is the format of your payload, you need to specify as one header, that is content type. So request data format, request content type, what request data you are sending, that you need to specify by using one header called content type header. So guys, are you able to understand what is a consumes and what is a content type? Yesterday we discussed about produces and accept. That is different story. Produces means what method can provide the response, what in which format method can provide the response. Accept means in which format client expecting response. But today it is consumes and content type. Consumes means in which format this method can take the input. In which format this method can take the input. In which format this method can take the input. Okay. Next one, content type. Content type is the header which represents in which format client is sending data to the request. In the data in the request body to the server. What is the format of that data? What is the format of that data? Are you guys getting my point? Are you guys getting my point? Yes. Can you read these points once? How to work with the HTTP post request? Can you read these points? How to work with the HTTP post request? Are you guys clear? HTTP post request is used to create a new record or resource at the server. To create a new record or resource at the server. Got it? Post request contains request body. Clients can send the data to the server in the body. So to read the data from the body, we use the annotation called @request body. What is consumes and what is produces? What is consumes and what is produces, guys? Can you tell me? What is consumes and what is produces? Consumes represents in which format method can take the input. Produces represents in which format method can provide the output. Content type header represents in which format client sending data in the request body. Content type header represents in which format client sending data in the request body. Chalo, let us develop one application to understand this consumes and produces. Let's understand by developing one application how to work with consumes format, how to deal with consumes using post request. New Spring Starter application. I'm going to create this as 34 REST consumes app. Okay. Next, Lombok web dev tools. Next, finish. I created a project. In this project, I will use HTTP post request. If you go to our pom.xml file, you can see the dependencies which I have added. By default, we added web starter. By default, we are adding web starter, which is used to develop our REST APIs, and I'm adding dev tools. Dev tools are used to reload the changes of our application. Lombok, I want setters getters of my application. For that, I'm going to use Lombok. Okay. Next, let us create one binding class. Let us create one binding class. Let me take it as a binding book class. Right. ID, name, price. Private integer ID, private string name, private double price. So let us specify @data, @XML root element, @data, @XML root element. Now let us create one REST controller which will take book data from request body. So I'm taking book REST controller. I'm taking book REST controller here. I'm taking book REST controller. So here I'm going to specify this as a REST controller. @REST controller we are specifying. Okay, guys, fine. So let us set up public. Let us set up public response entity, public response entity of string add book. So I need book data. Okay, book object I'm taking. Book object I am taking. Got it. Book object I'm taking. So from where this book object should come? This book object should come from request body. So client is going to send the data. So client will prepare a request. The request contains a header part and body part. Client will send a request, right? This request contains header. Request contains a header and the request contains body. Header will be available and body also will be available. Client will prepare a request with the header part and body part, and the client is going to send that request to the server. Request part will be available. Header part will be available, and body part also will be available. Clear? How I want to read this data from the body? To read the data from the body, I'm going to use one annotation called request body. If you want to read the data, from the URL, we have path param and we have query param. So here I want to read the data from the body. To read the data from the request body, we are using request body annotation. So in the header, client will set a content type. In the body, client will set a XML data, that is a payload. Payload will be available in the body. Okay, similarly here also in the header part, content type is equal to JSON. In the body, payload will be available in the JSON format. Payload will be available in the JSON format. So client will prepare the request, will send the request to the resource. So resource is going to take the data from the request body and it is going to process that request. It is going to take the data from the request body and it is going to process that request. Are you clear with my point? Are you guys clear with my point? How the client will prepare the request and will send? Request contains a header part. Request contains the body part. Header part will be available and body part also will be available for the client. Header part will be available and body part also will be available. Are you guys clear with this? Are you guys clear with this? Header part and body part? Yes, good. Now here, let me return new response entity. Return new response entity. Just I'm going to return the body and status. So what is the body here? Logic to store in DB. In future, we will do logic to store in DB. Whatever the data we are getting, I'm going to store that data into database. Once it is stored, I will send string message is equal to book added successfully. Book added successfully. That message I want to send in the body. Status code. When the record is inserted, we don't say that okay. We are going to say that created. Created is the status code. Created is belongs to 201 status code. Post method is used to create a record, right? When the record is created successfully, we will set it as a 201. 201 nothing but inserted or created. 200 means success. 201 means created. 200 means okay. 201 means created. Now, client is sending a post request. When the client is sending a post request, we are going to create a new record and we are going to send record created message to the client. That will be represented by using 201. So whatever the data client is sending, client may send the data in the XML format or client may send the data in the JSON format. Guys, how this REST API will understand client is sending the data in which format? Whether client is sending in the XML format or whether client is sending in the JSON format. How this REST API will understand that part? How this REST API will understand this part? In which format client is sending this REST API? Guys, how REST API will understand in which format client is sending the response? How client will understand that part? Come on. How this REST API will understand in which format client is sending? Content type. Content type. Okay. Based on the content type, REST API will understand in which format client is sending data. Let us bind this method to post request. How to bind this method to post request? Using post mapping. What is the annotation I'm going to use? Post mapping annotation I'm going to use for this. Post mapping annotation I'm going to use for this. Okay, so here I'm going to specify value is equal to book and I'm going to specify consumes is equal to application slash JSON comma application slash XML. What is the meaning of this? What is the meaning of consumes here? Guys, what is the meaning of consumes here? Consumes represents in which format this REST API can take the response. In which format this REST API can take the input. Sorry, consumes represents input format. So client can send the data in the request body either in the XML format or in the JSON format. This method is accepting input in two formats. One is XML format, another one is JSON format. But how it will understand in which format a client is sending based on the content type. Client should send the content type header. If a client is sending the data in the payload as XML, he need to set content type as XML. Based on the content type, this API will understand, okay, XML data came. So I need to read the XML data from the request body, and I need to convert that XML data into Java object. That will be taken care by message converter. Suppose if a client is sending the JSON data in the body, client should send content type is equal to JSON. Based on this header data, REST API will understand, okay, client is sending JSON data. I need to use a Jackson API to read the data from the request body and convert into Java object. So based on the content type, message conversion will happen at the REST API side. Are you guys clear? Are you guys clear with my point now? Are you guys clear with my point? Come on. Yes, good. Okay, let us develop and test this application. It's done. Development is already done. Refresh, run it. Run as boot application. Run as boot application. Console, nothing available. Go to this REST API. Get request /product product name. Sorry, book na /book. Go to get request, go to post request /book. I want to send the data. I want to send the data in the request body. I want to send the data in the request body. One second. Clear all these things. Yeah. Let's go for post request body, raw data, application /JSON. When I select this JSON, it is setting the content type as a JSON. Go to body. I want to send the book data. Keys ID is 101. Name is Java. Price is $450. Something like this. Guys, you observe, I'm sending a post request. Request type I'm selecting as a post. Request type I'm selecting as a post. Localhost :8080/book is my URL pattern. I'm selecting body. Post request contains body. In the body, I'm sending raw data in the JSON format. So header is there. Content type application /JSON. Okay, click on send. When I click on send button, can you see that you are getting book added successfully? Status code as a 201. Can you see that book added successfully with the status code as a 201? Are you able to see that book added successfully with the status code as 201? Yes or no? Book added successfully, status code is coming as a 201. Post request, URL, body data, JSON. So if I select JSON, the header will go content type is equal to JSON. Go to the server. Can you see the JSON data converted to Java object and Java object is printed on the console? Whatever the JSON data I'm sending in the request body, that JSON data sent to the server side, JSON data converted to Java object. How this method is reading that JSON data from the body? By using request body annotation. How the JSON data converted to Java object? JSON data converted to Java object by using request body annotation. Are you clear? Are you clear? Look at this. Post request, URL, body contains JSON data, header, JSON. Suppose for example, if I am going to send the data as a JSON, but content type I am setting as a XML. I'm confusing this application now. What is the header value? Application slash XML. But what is the data I have in the body? JSON. But what I am telling, I have the data in the JSON format, but content type I'm setting as XML. So is it the right approach to send a request, or it is a wrong approach to send the request? Click on send. What happened? It failed. It failed. You sent a JSON, but you are telling that you are sending XML. Then what happened when you send this content type as XML? It is trying to perform unmarshalling or marshalling. Whatever the JSON data, XML data you have, it is trying to, whatever the XML data you are sending in the body, it is trying to convert into Java object. But actually XML is available or JSON is available. JSON is available, but you are telling that you are sending XML. This is a problem. You should not do that. You should not do that. Okay, guys. Fine. So here we need to keep it as a JSON only. So here header content type is a JSON. My body data payload is also JSON. Then it can convert the JSON to Java object and we are getting the response successfully. Right. Understand? Suppose if you want to send a XML data, then you write the XML data, you set the content type as a XML, then you can send the request. Then it will take the XML data, it will convert the XML data into Java object. It will convert the XML data into Java object. Are you guys clear with my point? This is my binding class. This is my binding class. This is my REST controller. This is my binding class and this is my REST controller. Okay, this is my data which I am using to send in the request. JSON data. JSON data that I am using to send in the request. So this is my binding class. This is my REST controller. This is my JSON data. This is my JSON data. Clear? Are you able to understand how post request is working? How client is sending data to the server in the post request? How server is reading the data from the request? How server is reading the data from the request? Server side we are having request body annotation to read the data. Server side we are having request body annotation to read the data. Okay, so this is important point here. This 201 status code we are getting. This is a post request. This is our body data. This is our body data. So we have sent GET request yesterday. For GET request we are using accept because GET request is going to get the data from the server. Post request we are sending to send the data to the server. Yeah, guys, with this, are you able to understand? With this, are you able to understand how to send a post request to the server? How to send a GET request and how to send a post request to the server? Are you able to understand this part? Good. Now, can you tell me what is the difference between produces and consumes? Produces versus consumes. Content type versus accept. Can you guys tell me? Produces versus consumes, content type versus accept. What is produces? What is consumes? What is the content type? And what is accept? Can you guys tell me that? Why we are not using object mapper? Why we need to use object mapper, man? Spring Boot will take care of that conversion. You no need to do that conversion. You no need to do that conversion. Tell me, what is the difference between produces, consumes, content type, and accept? Yeah, guys, can you tell me what is the difference between produces and consumes and content type and accept? Produces attribute represents in which formats method can provide response to clients. Produces attribute represents in which formats method can provide response to clients. Okay. Now consumes attribute represents in which formats method can take request from clients. In which formats method can take request data from clients, or else in which formats method can provide response data to clients. Consumes attribute represents in which formats method can take request data from clients. Right. Accept header represents in which formats accept header represents in which format client expecting response from REST API. Content type header represents in which format client is sending request data to REST API. These four concepts are little confusing, guys, so be very careful when you are working with this. These four concepts are little confusing, and be careful when you are working with this. Got it? Got my point, all of you? Got my point, all of you? Produces versus consumes. Content type versus accept. Produces attribute represents in which formats method can provide the response data to clients. Produces attribute represents in which formats method can provide the response data to clients. Consumes attribute represents in which formats method can take request data from clients. Accept header represents in which format client expecting response from REST API. Content type header represents in which format client is sending request data to REST API. Are you clear? Are you clear? Now, guys, here I developed two different applications. In one application, I used a method with produces. In one application, I used a method with produces. In another application, I used a method with consumes. Produces is available and consumes is available. Can I use both consumes and produces in single method? Can I use both consumes and produces in the single method? Yes or no? Can we use consumes and produces in the single method? Yes. Okay. Now we can use both consumes and produces in single REST API method. Now let us take a requirement. Develop IRCTC REST API to book train ticket and send. Develop IRCTC REST API to book train ticket. So we need to build one REST API to book a train ticket. Guys, can you tell me what we need to do in order to develop this REST API? Now my requirement is very clear. I want to develop one REST API to book train ticket. Develop IRCTC REST API to book a train ticket. Tell me what we need to do to book a train ticket using IRCTC REST API. Come on, guys. What are the things directly? Are we going to start the coding? Directly, are we going to start the coding for this? Directly, are we going to start the coding to perform this? No. First, guys, to develop any REST API, first we need to understand what is input for the REST API and what is output of the REST API. Okay. So the first thing is, in order to develop this REST API, we need to understand the requirement. Requirement is to book a train ticket. So in order to book the train ticket, do we need some data? IRCTC needs some data to book a ticket, or directly it will book the ticket for you? It needs passenger data. For which passenger the ticket should be booked. Right now, to develop any REST API, first we have to understand the requirement. First we have to understand the requirement. Identify input data. Identify output data. That means request data, input or request data, output or response data. So you need to identify what data you need as input or what data you need in the request. And you need to identify what data you need to send as an output, or what data you need to send as a response. Are you guys clear with my point? Develop IRCTC REST API to book a train ticket. So in order to book any ticket, first you need to understand requirement, and you need to understand input data. What data we need as an input, what data we need as a output. After identifying input data and output data, create request and response binding classes. Create request and response binding classes. Then finally, create REST controller method. Create REST controller with required methods. Create REST controller with required methods. Create REST controller with required methods. Understood my point? To develop any REST API, first we have to understand the requirement. Then we need to identify what data we need from the client. And we need to understand what data we need to send to the client. For input data, we need to create a request binding class. For output data, we need to create response binding class. So if you want to develop any REST API in the real time, this is the procedure we need to follow. Test REST API methods behavior. Test REST API methods behavior. To develop any REST API, first we have to understand the requirement. To develop any REST API, first we have to understand the requirement. Then identify input data or request data. That means what input we are expecting from the client to book a ticket. So to book a ticket, we will expect passenger data. Once the ticket booking is completed, what data we will send as a response? Ticket data we will send as a response. So create request and response binding classes which are required to book a train ticket. Once your request and response binding classes are ready, then create a REST controller with required methods. Create REST controller with required methods. So here we need to create a method to book a ticket. That method will take passenger data as an input, which will give ticket data as an output. For passenger data, you need to create one binding class. For ticket data, you need to create one binding class. So request binding, response binding. Then create a REST controller. Once the REST controller is ready, Then test that REST API method behavior using Postman. Test REST API method behavior using Postman. Are you clear with my point? Are you clear with my point, guys? To develop any REST API, first we have to understand the requirement. Identify the input. That means what input you need to develop this API, what data you need to execute your business logic. So booking the ticket is our business logic. So in order to execute that business logic, what input data we need, what output data we need, that thing we need to identify. For input, we need to create one binding class. For output, we need to create one binding class. Create REST controller with required methods to test the REST API methods behavior. Test REST API methods behavior using Postman. Can you guys develop this REST API as an assignment before coming to tomorrow's session? You know how to develop a REST API. You know what is GET request. You know what is POST request. You know consumes. You know produces. You know accept. You know content type. We discussed all those topics separately. Now, using all those topics, we need to develop one API. We learned the concepts of bits and pieces. Now we need to connect all the dots and we need to develop one single REST API which will use consumes, produces, input, output, everything. If you can develop this REST API, that means you understood what is REST API and how to deal with REST API's development. If you are not able to develop this REST API, that means you did not understand the concepts clearly. You did not understand the concepts clearly. You can take anything as input and output. It's up to you. You know how to book a train ticket, right? What input they will expect from you and what output they will give you when you book the ticket. You identify that, Shilpa. It is your analysis. What input you need to take, what output you need to take. That is your analysis. You know already how to book a train tickets in the IRCTC. In the same way, I want you to write the logic. You no need to write the business logic, just to take the input and return the output. That's it. Can you guys do this? Can you guys do this 24 hours of time? Can you do this API development before coming to tomorrow's session? If you develop this API, then only you will understand the RESTful services. Otherwise, there is no use of doing this course. I explained what is REST API, why to go for REST API. In the market, everything depends on the REST only today. Every project is using RESTful services. I am giving the best content for the RESTful services, how to develop API, how to test the API, how to send GET request, how to send POST request, what is path param, what is query param, what is request body, what is consumes, what is produces, content type, accept. Lot of things we discussed already. With that knowledge, I am giving you one requirement to develop one REST API. So this is the requirement for you. I want everybody to develop this requirement before coming to tomorrow's session. I want everybody to develop this REST API before coming to tomorrow's session. This is assignment for you. Okay, guys. Thank you. With this, I'm stopping for today. We'll continue in the tomorrow session. Please complete that assignment before coming to tomorrow. Don't neglect. If you neglect, if you don't practice, I will not lose anything. If you don't practice, I will not lose anything. You remember that. So if you practice, you will get more clarity on the subject. You will learn the subject. That will help you to attend the interviews with confidence. So please do that practice. Thank you. We'll connect again in tomorrow's session. Thank you, guys. So today DevOps demo is available at 9:30. If anybody is interested to learn the DevOps, so today at 9:30 a.m. DevOps demo session is available. You can join for the demo. Zoom link available in the Telegram. Even in the website also you can access it. I will update these notes in the portal, guys. You can download from the portal and please practice this assignment. Thank you. See you tomorrow. Have a great day. Some people are not joining the class on time. Class is starting at 6:45. People are joining at 7 o'clock. Some people are joining at 7:15. Join the class at 6:45. If you don't join the class on time, you will miss the topics.